Gideon Falter went head-to-head with the organisers of the Palestinian Solidarity Campaign in Britain, and apparently it was a bit spicy.
And this is specifically the organiser of the march that Gideon Falter tried to provoke.
I think people would have seen the video. Let me say, first of all, the police officer in the video was entirely wrong to say that Mr. Falter being visibly Jewish would be a provocation. That's actually a smear against people marching. The reality is that every demonstration, there are many hundreds of Jewish people joining us, many in an organised Jewish bloc declaring themselves to be Jewish. Their presence is always warm and welcome. But the nature of the incident was not as Mr. Falter has tried to portray it. He suggested he was innocently going for a walk, came across the march and was asked to leave because he was openly Jewish. The reality was
Well, you know, when you're just randomly walking in central London with your security detail, just having and a film crew, and just sauntering around the place, just
casually
to stumble into a pro-Palestine march at the exact time and the exact place that you knew they were going to be. Just coincidence, you know?
As somebody who works for an explicitly Zionist fund for settlements in the West Bank, like,
it is. I mean, it's one hell of a coincidence, but it's definitely a coincidence. Yeah, innocent.
He came to the march with an entourage of 4 to 5 people and a film crew, sought to break through the stewards, physically push himself past the police in order to walk in front of the march, to provoke and to try to stop it. He was trying to provoke a confrontation. That's what happened.
He says that is not the case at all. What he was doing was, which he's perfectly entitled to do, he'd been to the synagogue and then he wanted to go for a stroll and he was prevented from doing that because he's Jewish.
Well, no, he was prevented from that because there was a fucking march going on. And freedom of movement isn't absolute.
No, again, if you're in part of the march, you have to walk in the direction of the march to ensure that it finishes, to make sure that the roads become clear again. You cannot walk against a march. First of all, if you're a member of the march, because that would mean it would go on forever, and that's that is against the rules that are set out to be able to have that legal demonstration. And definitely not if you're somebody who's deliberately there to antagonise them.
Because again, you're marching in the road. If he just carried on walking down the pavement, the sidewalk, not a problem, because you're allowed to be there. But if you're marching as part of the march in the middle of the road, they need to clear that fucking road because it's a road.
Exactly.
So there has to be like a start, you walk from A to B, you stop, you disperse. He decided not to follow any of those rules. And again, freedom of assembly and freedom of movement is not absolute. If there's a public safety issue and concern, the police step in and prevent people from going certain places. I think that's perfectly wise. Seems like a perfectly reasonable thing for them to do.
Well, I think the entire video of the incident is now available online. I think people should watch it. But I think people need also to be aware of who Mr. Falter is and the organisation he represents. They're a deeply controversial organisation. They were highly criticised shortly after they were set up by a parliamentary inquiry into anti-Semitism. They were criticised on the basis that they were deliberately conflating anti-Semitism with legitimate criticism of the actions of the Israeli state. They've also been heavily criticised for a stream of Islamophobic comments, including smears against the Mayor of London, and for using anti-Palestinian racist rhetoric. Since the marches have begun, the organisation have tried to stop them. They've even called for the army to be brought onto the streets to stop the marches happening. Now,
well, that's how you know they're in defence of freedom and democracy, calling upon the army to stop peaceful protesters in the capital.
They know that they've lost the argument over the morality of what Israel are engaging in. So all they can do is just say everybody who supports against us is like a Hamas operative or an anti-Semite, because they can't win the argument on their own terms anymore.
Now they're using the tactic of coming to the marches, trying to provoke an incident so that they can say there are scenes of disorder and therefore the marches cannot go ahead.
It's like Tommy Robinson, basically. He's trying to pull a Tommy Robinson, but more Zionist, bizarrely.
These are disgraceful antics. They should be shunned by anybody who believes in the right to protest and democratic freedoms.
Nevertheless, Ben, he and those with him, his film crew, whoever was with him, should be allowed to cross the road if they want to.
Yeah, look, I mean...
Are you 6? Are you a 6-year-old person?
She is. I mean, that is literally who she is.
Like, that's I don't even know how to begin with the nonsense. Just no, actually, freedom doesn't mean you can do anything. Like,
again, he was literally offered by the police. The police literally offered to escort him to the place that he wanted to go. Again, for his own safety, apparently, was the rhetoric being used by the police officer. And again, didn't say that he had to, but it was the offer of doing so. He just couldn't specifically go through the area where the march was. That's what we know from the footage that Sky News were the one who put out. Like, Kay Burley is working for the organisation who literally put out the footage that proved that Gideon Falter was just making up some nonsense.
Exactly, but like, for instance, the when the London Marathon just took place, you're not allowed to just walk down the Mall on that particular occasion. You can't just do that. You can't drive down the fucking Mall on that day because there are people. Like, it's a public safety concern, isn't it? There are times where some streets are not accessible.
I can't believe you weren't allowed to just walk across the Hanger Straight at Silverstone, Kev.
First of all, what he was actually doing was a counter-protest, and we would uphold. We have strong problems with Mr. Falter's political views. He believes it's legitimate for Israel to do exactly what it's doing at the moment. He's entitled to those views, however repugnant they might be to a whole section of people. He has a right to counter-protest. We uphold people's right to counter-protest. At most of the demonstrations, there are people who are counter-protesting. What he was trying to do was to claim he had the right to walk directly into the march. And if you watch the whole video, actually the police officer who was dealing with him, who made those remarks that were quite disgraceful, but what he was also trying to do was suggest to Mr. Falter a way in which he could get to where he claimed he wanted to get to by a different route. He didn't want to do that, and he had no intention of going anywhere else. He came deliberately to the march, as I say, with an entourage and a film crew, in order to provoke a confrontation so he could film it and then suggest that he was unsafe at the march.
He's with us. You want to respond?
Yeah, I mean, I find that, I listened to part of that. I just find that absolutely astonishing. I was not going to try and provoke something. And if Ben Jamal thinks that I'm trying to provoke something, what exactly does he think I'm trying to provoke by being openly Jewish?
Oh, for God's sake, no one gives a fuck about the openly Jewish thing.
It's because the framing again, he said, well, how would I be provoking somebody by being openly Jewish? Again, trying to straw man the argument here that's being made by Ben Jamal. It's like, no, we didn't mention any of that. And in fact, Ben Jamal explicitly repudiated the usage of that particular turn of phrase when he was talking about the statements made by the officer. And they said, but also the officer said this thing. And we've all seen the footage. Like, if you weren't there to provoke somebody, why didn't, when the officer just said, well, there's a protest going on, you can't walk across the road or walk against the protest at the moment. Go another way, I will tell you which way to go and will escort you if you need to. And you, instead of taking the reasonable option of somebody, if was genuinely trying to cross the road and go, oh, I didn't, oh, officer, sorry, let's go the other way. When, no, I need to specifically go across this very protest, which explicitly opposes the kind of views that I have and protest against myself.
His march. He has these marches constantly. I was not there to counter-protest. I was not there with film crews or anything of the sort. His march was being covered by film crews, including Sky's film crew, which filmed it. I was not there to counter-protest. I was simply Jewish in the vicinity of these marches.
Oh, gee. Oh,
also,
God.
whoa, okay.
Oh.
If you weren't filming, but other people were filming, how come you were the person who released the first clip?
I think it's a very good point.
Who was filming the clip that you got? Where did you get that clip from? You'd think he'd tell us, wouldn't you?
And what we know from 6 months of this is that at these marches, we see constant incidents of glorification of terrorism. We see people engaging in all sorts of
Where's that? Where's that at? I saw that one picture of like 3 people with the hand glider thing, which was fucked up. That's 3 people, my dude.
Millions on for, again, what's interesting, he keeps saying, well, we've had 6 months of these protests and we've definitely seen loads of these things, even though no one's seen it outside of a couple of very isolated incidents. Interestingly enough, how millions and millions of people have come down to these protests week after week after week for 6 months, and the only example people can ever come up with is just, well, one time this person said Intifada revolution, and that's bad because resistance to, you know, illegal occupation is bad now.
Yes, indeed. In every conceivable way, including throwing stones at tanks.
Semitic hatred, as I saw at that march then. And I didn't see anybody from the Palestine solidarity campaigns, different stewarding teams. I didn't see anybody saying, for example, that the people shouting scum or disgusting or Nazis or anything of.
Because they're not. But calling you scum doesn't make one a Nazi, my friend. I don't know that if you think being visibly Jewish means that anything that's ever said or done to you is Nazi.
What's crazy is
that's not how that works, is it?
Again, of all of the millions of people, I've never seen a single incident, not one, of somebody being a Nazi in any of these protests. Yet the highest profile, like, right-wing figures in this country, like the populist, hard right people in this country, they all go to the pro-Israel protests.
Yeah.
At me, I didn't see any of them being remonstrated with by their fellow marchers. And this is what we see week after week after week. And it is no wonder that Jewish people are increasingly feeling that they cannot come into the centre of town, that they cannot be in the vicinity of these marches. And unfortunately, as I...
What about the hundreds of Jewish people at all of these marches? They seem to be absolutely fine. Again,
well, we'll see what he thinks about that in a second.
I found out, that's true. It's not just a suspicion. It's not just a fear. It is absolutely true.
Okay, Jamal, right of reply?
Well, look, I mean, first of all, the narrative is entirely untrue. I would invite your viewers to go and watch the entire video. They will see exactly what happened, and Mr. Falter's organisation has come to try to disrupt every single one.
No, I'm sorry, that's not true. I have not been there at any of your demonstrations.
I didn't say you.
No, I'm sorry, this is not true. You also, I heard as I came on, I heard you saying all sorts of nonsense about what my views are. You do not know me. You do not know my views. And I'm afraid to say I have not been at your marches. You're trying to make out that this is something I do week in, week out. This is the first one of your marches that I have come across.
Right,
what rubbish you talk, man.
Can I speak without interruption from Mr. Falter?
Go on.
If you'd like to say something true.
What I actually said was your organisation has been at each one of the marches. I didn't say that you had been at each one of the marches. And I do know your views because you are the head of an organisation who is very clear about your views. And as I said, you have been widely criticised as an organisation for conflating anti-Semitism.
No, I'm sorry, you said, for example, that you started to talk about my views on Israel and things like that, things I have not spoken about publicly. So how can you possibly know my views? You make things up.
Well, Mr. Falter, you are the head of a campaigning organisation, so your views
so are you. And what about your organisation, which puts these marches on, where we've done polling now, which shows 90% of British Jews are afraid to come into city centres. What do you say about, for example, people?
And I'm
I don't care. I'm sorry. I just don't care. I mean, I don't care if the feelings of people are completely incongruent with the reality of what's on the ground. Like, if you could tell me, I know this many anti-Semitic incidents that have happened here. I know that these problems that we have are illegitimate. If you can point to me some kind of study that you have in terms of levels of anti-Semitism at these marches, that'd be fine. That would be legitimate criticism of what's going on there. But saying people are scared of going down there, largely because people like this guy will try and essentially tell the lies that he's been telling by trying to pretend that people there are broadly anti-Semitic when they absolutely are not. And as Ben has rightly pointed out, Jewish people are welcome on these marches, and they've always been welcome on these marches. That's why people are scared. People are scared because of the lies that you tell them about what the pro-Palestinian movement represents, and because you try and conflate your pro-Zionist position with somehow being the entire groupthink of the international Jewish community when it absolutely is not, which then allows you to conflate opposition to the actions of the State of Israel and opposition to Zionist principles as being somehow anti-Semitic when it absolutely is not.
Dressed as Hamas terrorists at your demonstrations. What about...
Has Hamas... Hang on, did he say there were Hamas terrorists at the demonstrations?
Say about, for example, people dressed as Hamas terrorists at your demonstrations. What?
Okay, literally just we're going back to the talking about the three people with the paraglider emoji. Again, this is all the evidence they have.
Yeah.
I don't know. I can carry on trying to talk over Mr. Falter, but if he could just be silent for a minute, and then I can make my points, and then I'll allow him to respond in any way he wishes to, rather than having him shout over me. His views are extremely well known, but the issue again that he's not dealing with, from the start of these marches, very early on, his organisation called for the army to be brought onto the streets. The issue is the problem with Mr. Falter's presence was not that he is openly Jewish. He's not dealing with the fact that at every single march, there are thousands of Jewish people marching, many of them in an organized...
Not, what rubbish.
They're in an...
What? Is he denying that these people are Jewish? Or denying that they're there?
Who
Is he
knows?
pretending to be Jewish? 'Cause that would be
Anything that
one
doesn't
part.
suit his narrative, therefore, must be untrue.
Even the ones marching behind the banner that says Jews against genocide, those people.
Or Jewish bloc for Palestine, or whatever it might be. There was literally a video. There's literally a video that was being gone around on Twitter today. Somebody saying, "Well, my wife is Jewish, and she went out to say that she's not scared about these protesters." And it's a picture of this woman standing with Jew and Israel on her T-shirt, and in the video, there's literally a poster saying Jews for Palestine in the background, or Jews for a ceasefire, or Jews don't support genocide. It's just like,
yeah, brilliant.
it's just again. Let me find like the actual.
Yeah.
I think
Like,
it's just turning around to it now.
As the comment there, the top comment, the victim card has already expired. Well, they're so desperate to be victims here. And don't get me wrong, dude, Jewish people do suffer anti-Semitism in the UK. Of course they do. But if you just stand out there with Jew and Israel on your T-shirt and they march past you and nothing happens, does that not suggest to you that you may have overreacted to the situation?
Yeah, she's literally being completely ignored, and there's people with the Jews for Palestine banner in the background as they film it. You'd have thought they would have just cut that bit out of the film because it just undermines everything that they're saying.
Organized bloc, in a Jewish bloc. They are warmly welcomed at every demonstration. Some of them have put out public statements disassociating themselves with what Mr. Falter and his organization were doing at the last march. So that's...
Let him come back to you on that.
So first of all, I don't want to continue having a conversation with Ben Jamal.
I'm running
happy to have an
away!
interview with you, but...
Gideon faltered. Gideon's faltered, has he?
He did. Jesus Christ, mate. Like, how much of a bitch have you got me? I don't want to continue to talk to him. I mean, firstly, you didn't talk to him. You shouted over him for a bit. Like, that wasn't really a conversation. And secondly, again, do you think it makes you look good to just not talk to him? What has he even said that's been offensive at all in any way? He just said, you're a controversial man with well-known opinions.
I mean, the bit that is interesting, the bit that has actually made Gideon falter, is Ben Jamal saying, "Well, there are Jewish people on these marches, and they're warmly welcomed every time in the Jewish bloc for Palestine." I was like, "Oh no, don't want to talk to this person." Yeah, because this person is explicitly saying that there are plenty of people from his demographic group who don't support the genocidal actions of the state of Israel,
which is obviously the truth they can never admit.
Yep,
breaks the entire kind of circuit of madness.
But I don't want to carry on.
You did want to come on and talk.
Right. No. I'm not criticising UK.
That you wanted to have the conversation.
I did want to.
Final thought from you then, Ben Jamal, if I may.
I don't want to talk to him, but I do want to respond to what he said. Oh, so you're a bitch then? Okay, cool.
Hold on one second. Ben Jamal, according to Gideon, he has written to the Chief Superintendent saying that he will be in the vicinity of one of your marches potentially again next week. Will you welcome him?
Well, I don't welcome people with his political views, but he's welcome to counter-protest. He has a right to do that. And the police have a job of trying to manage the protest and the counter-protest. What Mr. Falter is trying to do, what he was trying to do on Saturday and what he's now encouraging other people to do is to come to the march to try to disrupt it, to try to stop it progressing and to seek a confrontation. And what very clear, people aren't stupid, it's very clear what he's trying to do. He's trying to provoke scenes of disorder.
Okay, we must leave it there, Ben, because I want to bring in Gideon. But thank you for taking the time, very much appreciated. What do you plan to do on the 27th of April?
Thank you. Well, I plan to walk again. I plan to go for a walk in the vicinity of these marches. I should be allowed to do that. Any Jewish person who wants to do that, anybody who's got friends.
Well, At no point was anybody saying you can't walk somewhere near the marches. What you can't do is walk against the march or disrupt it in any way. Like,
Yeah.
you know the march is going to be that I'm got this plan. I'm going to deliberately walk across this very specific march route rather than, I don't know, getting the tube like a normal person to avoid the fact that a whole road is going to be blocked with protesters. But I'm deliberately going to do it, and I'll definitely won't bring a film crew this time.
Yeah. Well, Mahmoud's right. He's planning. His plan is to just be a prick.
Yeah.
I'm just going to go into London and be a prick and make a disturbance of myself, so that I can get on the extended victim playing griftosphere. Let's go.
Who are Jewish should feel free to walk with them as well. And the
When
fact,
does a walk constitute a march?
well, if we say, everybody meet here and walk to this particular point, that would be a march. That's not what we're saying. We're saying that if these things are so safe, then we should be allowed to walk. And what Ben Jamal says is absolutely not true. There are not thousands of people, Jewish people, joining his marches. That is just...
Yes, there are. Again, you have to deny their Jewishness or their existence in order to make that claim.
I mean, you've seen a lot of what these pro-Zionist people are like, where they will literally say things like, if you don't support Israel, then you're a Jew in name only. They
They've
say
been
these things. Again,
dejudified.
I'm not trying to say that that's necessarily what Gideon Falter is saying. I do not know his views on this issue, but we have seen plenty of people essentially take this line to try and, again, equate Zionism and Judaism or Jewishness, I guess, when these things cannot be equated because one's a political ideology and one's an ethno-religious group, which, of course, allows there to be even more anti-Semitism in response, because that same conflation is made by anti-Semites to then attack Jewish people for the crimes of Zionists that Jewish people had done in their name that they were in no way responsible for.
Just categorically...
You clarified that.
It's categorically untrue.
How many people do you expect to be walking with you next Saturday in the vicinity?
No challenge on that claim, Kay.
Exactly.
What?
Kay, you're supposed to be a journalist. They just made a demonstrably false, provably, obviously false claim. You could at least push back. Just ask him for any evidence of that claim, because again, he has to be denying their Jewishness or their existence in order to make the claim. So, which one is it?
Of a pro-Palestine march?
I don't know. It's up to people to decide if they want to walk, where they want to walk. The thing that I would encourage, though, is for people to walk in the vicinity. And if it's so safe and the policing is so good, then it will be safe for everybody to do so.
Do you think it might be inflammatory?
I mean, I don't think, people have said to me, and Ben Jamal, I heard him saying as well, that I was trying to prevent...
So you won't talk to him, but you'll talk about him. You're a bitch, mate. You're an absolute bitch.
Yep.
I don't want to talk to this man, but I will badmouth him then once you kick him off the show. What the fuck are you a child? What's your fucking damage?
Provoke something. And if you follow that line of argument, then the line of argument has to be that being Jewish publicly in the vicinity of these marches is a provocation, is...
Okay, right. You could say that about anything, couldn't you, mate? Let's say someone does a fucking... I mean, in theory, you're allowed to be a Nazi. Nazi marching past a Jewish group of people. Are they supposed to just be completely cool with that situation? Is that not potentially a public safety hazard? A potential breach of peace might take place?
I mean, I wouldn't make that comparison. What's interesting, though, is again he says to say here.
I
will be marching. The thing is, what's the crux of this point, though? The real crux of this point is that he's saying, well, I'm going to be there with other Jewish people, and either you accept my framing that we're not safe because these things are happening, or you have to accept the things are safe and that you're just going to ignore that. I'm just like, this is why he has to claim that there are no Jewish people on the marches, because his entire tactic here is to undermine the marchers themselves. He's not there to advocate for any of his own political viewpoints necessarily explicitly. What he is trying to do there is specifically make these provocations to ensure that we have some way in which to undermine the broad existence of the pro-Palestine process by saying that they're not safe for Jewish people. So he cannot admit by his own logic that Jewish people are there safely and welcomed onto the marches in any capacity whatsoever, because it's the one thing that undermines his entire point.
And he's
Hey there, if you enjoyed the video, make sure that you like and leave a comment. That helps the video out in the algorithm. If you subscribe and ring the bell, it'll let you know when I go live. I stream every day on YouTube and Twitch. You can also follow all of my socials down in the description. And if you want to support me in a more financial manner, there's a join button for memberships. It's just 99p to be a member on YouTube, as well as a Patreon, and there's some merch there as well. And hopefully I'll catch you on the next video. Take care.